What if I told you that in one video, I could teach you how to know what to plant and when, no matter what time of year it is and no matter what area of the US you lived in? The secret is your growing zone is the least likely source of information to actually tell you what to plant and when. So let's talk about what a growing zone can do for you, and then the other two metrics that can actually help you a lot more as a vegetable gardener and as a native plant, fruit tree, or perennial gardener. My name is Vanessa, and I garden in Central Texas. I'm coming to you from the garden in early August right now, where it just cooled off enough at 7 p.m. at night for it to be 95 degrees. And it's time to get going on my fall garden. So I want to tell you about the three metrics that I use on how to decide when to get things going for my annual vegetable garden, and how I use things like my growing zone to decide what perennial plants I want to plant in the fall that will actually survive the coldest weather that I will experience in my area, and how I use my ecoregion data to source plants that are even more adapted to the crazy climate that we have here in the Edwards Plateau region of Central Texas, which is zone 9A, 8B, with a growing season around 250 days long. Knowing the three metrics of calculating your growing season, knowing your growing zone, and the limitations that it has when it comes to the data you actually get by looking up your growing zone are the building blocks for you being able to confidently make decisions in your garden. But this is not going to make a perfect garden. You still need to have healthy soil and healthy prepared garden beds regularly so that when you are timing things out and you want to plant, they can be ready. So a good garden plan and a good garden bed is the foundation to being able to pull off these plans that you make. And speaking of beds, I recently upgraded my bed with the FlexiSpot Kana Japanese joinery bed frame, and this thing has been a game changer. I feel like I live in a hotel now. My old bed frame was so squeaky and lacked support that it was seriously hurting my quality of sleep. Upgrading my bed frame is a big decision, so I opted for the Kana Japanese joinery bed that uses rubber wood, sustainable wood material that is cut specifically to fit together using the Japanese joinery style of design, which fits solidly in place, avoiding screws that get loose over time. With inward recessed legs designed to reduce noise where the bed frame meets the wall, and multiple headboard options. With a crossbeam support system, it gives a solid foundation for their slat system that is also velcroed and pegged in on the side so nothing is going to move. And with the ability to support 1,500 pounds, this frame is solid. And this bed is silent. No creaking, no squeaking. And when I say silent, I mean silent. This thing is sturdy. The frame is sturdy, but it's simple. With the Japanese joinery design, it leaves a ton of space underneath for storage if I need it, while maintaining a minimalist, clean design. FlexiSpot is known for their ergonomic yet stylish designs of standing desks and office chairs, and their Kana Japanese joinery bed also has the option of coming with matching nightstands under the bed drawers and a convertible slat system in case you want to use an adjustable mattress on top. In direct comparison to the competitors, this bed frame is a fantastic quality and value at its price. Click the link below to experience the FlexiSpot bed frame for yourself. Use my discount code on the screen for an instant discount and transform your sleep with comfort, convenience, and unmatched value. Most gardeners know their growing zone. That is the USDA growing zone, which divides the US into a map that shows zones, I believe, 3 all the way to zone 11 in the tropical regions. Zones are something that a gardener will use as an identifying marker. As in, if I open a video and I say, I am a zone 9A, 8B gardener, and I say I'm in Texas, you can assume where I'm at in Texas based on a zone map. And if you're in zone 8B, 9A, anywhere else in the US, you might think that we have a similar climate, but that's probably not true. And that's because growing zones only tell you the coldest single day that your area will experience based on a rolling 30-year average. That 30-year average is updated sometimes every 10 to 15 years as well. So my zone went from being 8B to 9A instead of 8A to 8B. Now, what does that actually mean for my area? It means that the coldest average temps that we have here in my area are about 20 to 25 degrees, even though I do reach about 12 to 15 degrees every winter for the last 3 to 4 winters. But that's not fully enough to bring that average up when we have overall warmer winters here. Why is it important to know how cold it actually gets at a singular most coldest point every winter? If I've planted a plant that is supposed to go dormant in the winter, survive the winter weather, and come back in the spring, it needs to be able to survive the coldest temperature that my area will usually experience. So when we are looking at perennial plants, which are plants that die back and should come back in the spring when it warms up again, we are looking for perennials that are rated for the zone that we live in. Now, when we are trying to plant a vegetable garden, we are usually planting annual vegetables. Annual vegetables are plants that need to be planted every year or every season. They usually will either die off pretty quickly after the harvest window is over with, or they'll die off in a frost if they're not frost hardy or frost tolerant. We actually need to know our frost dates when it comes to annual vegetable gardening and annual flower gardening. So knowing your frost dates can help you calculate the length of your growing season. And your growing season is going to be from your average last frost date, which is the end of your winter, to your average first frost date, which is the beginning of your winter. So our last frost date in my area is on average March 19th, March 20th. Our first frost date is on average November 13th, but really November 20th is a little bit closer to when we see our first frost. So whatever the time frame between those two frosts is, that's how many days we have as an active growing season. If you have plants that cannot tolerate a frost, they will melt when it hits 32 degrees. They can grow within that time frame. Now, just because that's time in between frost doesn't mean all of those days are cold enough or hot enough for certain plants to thrive. And that is when understanding your general days at certain temps, like how hot is it for how long in your climate, those things are very important for your microclimate to understand what varieties of annual vegetables you can grow. But when it comes to timing and seed starting and knowing, can I plant things for the spring, for the summer, for the fall, if it's able to handle a frost, you can plant it right before that time frame of frost comes up. Hope that the plant is mature enough to survive a frost. When it comes to annual veggies, it's important to understand the differences between a frost tender, frost tolerant, and frost hardy vegetable. So a frost tender vegetable is something that will literally melt at 32 degrees Fahrenheit, and it will most likely not come back from the dead. That's going to be things like tomatoes, peppers, basil, green beans, cucumbers, and squash. Things that are frost tolerant literally means that they will tolerate a frost. They're not going to love it. They probably won't melt. The frost needs to be closer in the 30 to 32 degree range, but once we get in the 25 to 28 degree range, those plants might struggle a little bit more if they're not mature enough. Frost hardy plants is a much smaller list, and that's going to be things like spinach and broccoli and carrots for the most part, but there are a few more things in there. And those are the things that could be covered in 1.5 inches of ice, and if they are mature enough, they will most likely survive. And so you can plant those things further into the winter. Frost tender vegetables are kind of something you want to make sure you're getting ready to harvest before we start getting really regular hard frosts. Frost tolerant vegetables are something you'll want to start ahead of a frost time frame, but as long as you are starting to harvest it or it's pretty mature by the time some frosts start to happen, then you should be okay to have that growing. And a frost tender plant is something you really want to make sure is within your growing season time frame. So let's look up our growing season and frost dates on the Farmer's Almanac, and I will show you this really cool chart that I found on another website that gives me some percentages of risk of frost as we get further into the time frame of when I should be expecting my first frost. This is from garden.org, and it just shows me my risk by date for frost. This is what a growing zone map looks like, and this was updated in the last 3 years to where most of the growing zone shifted about a half zone warmer. So you'll see zones like 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, but there are also half zones, which are zone 8A, zone 8B. And so there are small differences in about 5 degrees colder or warmer in that singular coldest day, which is an average over 30 years for that specific area or the corresponding color on the map.
On this map, it actually shows the drastic differences that happened when the zone map was updated. So when looking up your growing zone, you can type in USDA growing zone, and there's a lot of maps, but I like to go to the USDA Plant Hardiness Growing Zone website. You can type in your exact address or your zip code, and it's going to populate what it says your zone is. And then you can go and you can do a detailed zoom in of an updated map. And you can actually zoom in closer to see how those zones kind of lay out in the border. And then if you click on that, you can actually get a breakout of the counties and how they are zoned.
This is simply just going to tell you how cold it could potentially get where you live. You'll notice on this map that there are zones that Texas shares almost with Oregon and Washington. Do you think that we have the same rainfall patterns, rainfall amounts, humidity, and length of growing season? No, probably not. And that's why using your growing zone as the only identifying factor in what you should plant in your garden and assuming that that means somebody else has the same exact climate as you, that's just going to hurt you as a gardener. So branching out into ecoregions is a great way for you to get a much better snapshot of the actual climate that the plants in your area will be growing. This is how you can go on the Native Plant Society of Texas's website, and they have a really cool map that lets you look up your specific ecoregion based on either your zip code or you can put in your exact address. This will at least give you a list of plants that are either adapted or native to your specific ecoregion. This is specific for Texas, but you can look up the ecoregion of any state in the US. What an ecoregion can tell you is your precipitation patterns, the composition of the native soil that's in your area, the pros and cons of that soil and kind of how it behaves, and how between the soil composition and the precipitation patterns and the hot weather temperature patterns, what do the plants in your region typically do to adapt to that kind of weather? So I'm in the Edwards Plateau ecoregion, which is kind of this really cool blend of like West Texas, North Texas, East Texas, and South Texas. We're kind of in the middle because I'm in the Central Texas region. So we do have a lot of limestone and a lot of clay, which makes our soil pretty alkaline, which can be difficult for growing vegetables directly in unless you amend it really well. But our native plants are really well adapted to a feast and famine type of pattern when it comes to precipitation because we do get flooding rains, but then we get long periods of heat and drought. So opting for plants that are on ecoregion plant lists is going to be a great way to not only support the very hyperlocal pollinators and wildlife that are in your area, but also be able to have plants that survive.
When looking to get hyper-specific local ecoregion data for your climate, you want to look at level 3 ecoregion. That's this map, and that's the one I'm referencing. The Edwards Plateau is one of the level 3 regions. The level 2 ecological regions are useful for national and subcontinental overviews of ecological patterns. So they're cool to know, but they're going to be a little less helpful for your specific microclimate as far as like the regional things that affect how plants and animals grow in your area. The level 1 ecological regions are 15 broad ecological regions that are designated to provide the broad backdrop to the ecological mosaic of our continent, putting it in context at global or intercontinental scales, which is really cool when you are going and comparing how things grow here in comparison to places like in Europe.
Now, can the information on an ecoregion map and a breakdown on your ecoregion help you be a better vegetable gardener? Absolutely. If you have not sat back and observed the weather patterns from the lens of gardening in your area, you may only be able to pull from data that other people have collected for your climate. What you can do is start to rectify the differences between the data people are providing you when it comes to how much rain should we expect, how long should the high heat be here, why is my soil so hard and why does it not absorb water, why does it only absorb water and not drain. All of these things can be really helpful when it comes to trying to even grow an annual vegetable if you have not taken multiple years to sit outside and observe how the changes in your environment affect the plants that you grow. Over time, time, it's best to get your own observations in. But until you get to that stage in gardening, it's great that we have so many resources that you can pull from. Ecoregions being some of the more in-depth resources, growing zones being good for at least letting you know how cold it could potentially get where you live, and growing seasons really giving you an idea about what your timeline is for any plants that you may want to plant. When it comes to things like fruit trees and plants that may need chill hours, it's also really great to look up a chill hours map for your area. So if you're looking to get some fruit trees and you want something that is going to do really well in our area, what you need to look at, specifically in the southern region, is how many chill hours does this plant need to produce, which means how many hours typically below 45 to 35 degrees over the winter need to literally be calculated where that plant is actually experiencing those temperatures in order for the plant to be triggered to flower and properly produce in the spring or summer. This is really important when it comes to stone fruit and things like blueberries. So you want to look for the most part at plants that say low chill hours. And this is a range of what low actually means, but a lot of the peach trees that do well here have chill hours that are 500 hours or below that. For my specific area, just northwest of Austin, Texas, in the suburbs in Leander Cedar Park area. Just north of me, trees that need about 750 to 800 chill hours can still fruit. So there's a big difference between my area and the areas just a zone or two north of me in my own state. This is also really relevant for things like blueberries. The blueberry plants that I grow, they are the sunshine variety and sharp blue varieties, and they only require between like 200 and 300 chill hours for the most part. So that gives me a really good chance because my area usually gets about 450 to 550 chill hours each year, and that gives me a good chance of those plants actually flowering and fruiting. So understanding how cold it truly gets at one point or another, how long does it stay cold, how long does it stay hot, how much rain do we get, but in what pattern do we actually receive that precipitation, and what are the plants that are going to survive the easiest in the feral conditions of Texas for my specific region are going to be a great way for you to all of a sudden have two green thumbs because you know what data to use for what specific purpose, and it's going to make you a better gardener. I hope this video has been helpful to demystify and break down some of the resources and clarify on some of the misinformation that gets shared amongst different gardeners who may just not understand how little of information they have been working off of. If you have any questions about this information, please don't hesitate to comment below. I'm happy to help, and I want you guys to be more confident in making decisions in what you grow, no matter what time of year it is, and if I'm too busy to post a video to tell you when. Maybe pick something off one of these lists of plants and try to source it and grow it so that you can learn just one more thing in the garden, because remember, if you never grow, you'll never know. See you next time.